Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today. One of my viewers wanted to know what my thoughts were regarding the new DC animated adaptation of Crisis of Infinite Earths called Crisis of Infinite Earths Part 1. Now, this Crisis of Infinite Earths adaptation is going to be 3 movies and is supposed to capture the epic scale and scope of the 1985 comic book maxi series written by legendary comic book writer Marv Wolfman and penciled by late legendary comic book artist and comic book icon George Perez. And this version of Crisis of Infinite Earths is supposed to be a universe-shattering event. However, the universe that they're basing it in really isn't big enough to capture this event to answer a critical question most screenwriters like myself have to answer before we put fingers to the keyboard, and that question is, why should we care? Because it's really hard to care about what happens in the trailer for this adaptation of Crisis of Infinite Earths, because the world that they base it in, the Tomorrowverse, has not been around long enough for the audience to care about the characters in it. Moreover, this universe, the Tomorrowverse, is only a universe of characters that are a part of direct-to-video and streaming exclusive movies, so the audience for it is very small, and the audience really hasn't formed a personal connection with these characters, so this adaptation really starts to fail because it really doesn't make you care about any of the characters in it. Now, the original Crisis of Infinite Earths was a groundbreaking event back in 1985 because it took place in a DC universe that millions of people knew about and millions of people grew up with. However, the Tomorrowverse is a world that has only again been around 3 years, starting with the movie Superman, Man of Tomorrow, and all of the events come out of the Justice League War World movie, which just came out this year. So it's a event that really is hard to make a relationship to readers and viewers and give us a connection to the characters because the characters are too new to the viewer. Now, if this Crisis of Infinite Earths series of movies took place and revolved around the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm-verse, this whole event would be earth-shattering because the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm-verse basically has over 25 years of continuity and has over 30 years of fans, and with the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm-verse having over 30 years of fans and hundreds of millions of viewers who used to watch Batman the Animated Series on broadcast TV and saw Justice League End on cable and purchased on DVD for people's collections, there would be an incentive for the customers to come back to pick up this animated movie on DVD or go out here and sub to Max to go out here and see this 3-movie event. That's the big problem with the Crisis of Infinite Earths, is that the audience isn't have a reason to care, and it doesn't have a reason to care about a world of direct-to-video movies that took place over the course of just 3 years. There's just not enough scale and scope for this event as related to the characters they want to base it on. That's the big problem with the Crisis of Infinite Earths trailer. It doesn't feel like a crisis. No, it feels like just another direct-to-video event. And that's what really keeps this from being the major event that it was in the comics and it just isn't going to be executed well with this animated movie. Now, this isn't the first time that DC has tried to adapt Crisis of Infinite Earths. I remember them doing this with what they called the Arrowverse, created by Greg Berlanti, and failing miserably due to the poor execution, because with an event like Crisis of Infinite Earths, you really need a really large world to be built as related to a universe. You need a really large world to have that emotional resonance and impact. You need a really large world to really make people connect with that world, to see how this affects people, because that was one of the core parts of Crisis of Infinite Earths, is you saw how these universes ending affected the lives of people like those on Earth 2 or other worlds. You need that big impact, and as related to animated universes, in the DC universe, the only world that is big enough to be able to handle this event was the Timverse, and Warner Brothers basically didn't want to go with the Timverse because they didn't want to alienate their customer base of fans who loved that universe. But that's the only universe that's going to make people care enough about a Crisis of Infinite Earths movie or 3 movies, because people needed to form connections with these characters. They needed to form relationships with these characters. But without those relationships, this just becomes another death, and more death event, similar to the Justice League movie Apocalypse War, one of the movies that I just truly have great contempt for, because it really runs counter to everything regarding superheroes. I mean, you have Superman on an offensive, something completely out of character, and Apocalypse War left a sour taste in my mouth as related to these kinds of events and how they are adapted. And this Crisis of Infinite Earths movie really leaves a more sour taste in my mouth, because this Crisis of Infinite Earths movie just shows me that Warner Brothers and DC are not about making an adaptation that stays true to the heart of this material. No, what they want to do is go out and get a cash grab with this series of movies, and they're going to wind up not really making much money due to the poor execution from what I've seen in the trailer. Because what I saw in the trailer really didn't really grab my emotions, and the film that came before it, Justice League Warworld, left me indifferent. And with the build into this universe leaving you indifferent, it's hard to care about what happens to these characters, because we have not formed enough of a close relationship with them because of the lack of time as related to all 3 of these years that this Tomorrowverse has been established. So when I look at this Tomorrowverse adaptation of Crisis of Infinite Earths, it's another one that falls flat, just like the Arrowverse version, and it falls flat because the scale and scope of this adaptation just isn't big enough, just isn't grand enough, just isn't epic enough. And out of all the universes, they used this one, which had been around for just 3 years. They couldn't use the previous version because the Apocalypse War ended that one in a just really miserable fashion. And then we got the Constantine direct-to-video movie that really left a further sour taste in your mouth. And DC has a problem with its animated projects these days in not knowing how to end on an up note, like they did with Justice League Unlimited. The way Justice League Unlimited ended on an up note, but all we get is more misery and dreariness, and that's not what really DC Comics fans want to see. No, we want to see something hopeful and friendly, something that will give you an inspiration, because DC characters are icons of hope and optimism. And another Crisis of Infinite Earths movie, really, that doesn't stay true to the heart of the material. It's not really something I would care about. I mean, we've got a movie with the Flash in it, but no Kid Flash to take on the legacy. We've got none of the stuff that gives you hope and optimism that we had at the end of the Crisis really setting up. So when I look at this whole trailer for Crisis of Infinite Earths, I still see the crisis going on at DC as related to direction, and I don't see a movie that I can get excited about going out here to see or anticipate. I mean, if it comes on Max and it shows up in the 6 months, I have this $2.99 subscription. I'll take a look at it, but I'm not really feeling excited about it because most of these Tomorrowverse movies are meh. And from what I saw in the trailer for Crisis of Infinite Earths, I saw more meh. And that's a shame because the original comic of Crisis of Infinite Earths was an epic event that got you excited. And I find no reason to get excited about this Crisis of Infinite Earths because it shows me that the people at DC are still struggling with a creative crisis as related to the animated films they make. Now, if you want to pick up my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that comic on Lulu.com right now and pick up a paperback copy. And if you want to pick up my first digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents on Amazon, and you can pick up the paper version of that comic in the book Esteem Blast from the Past, along with the other books of the SJS Direct universe, such as the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my vampire novel Eternal Night, my Black Sorority novel The Thetas, and other great books on the SJS Direct imprint. You can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, Walmart, and Target. And if you want to help me make the next full SJS Direct comic, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.